I greatly appreciate it. The Fairfax Reentry Council today is recognizing Mental Health Awareness Month. So today we have a terrific panel who will tell us about some of the mental health resources that are currently available to those that we serve, as well as some best practices for those of us that are working with those that may be experiencing mental health conditions or crisis. So my name is Caitlin Sweeney. I'm the Senior Reentry Probation and Parole Officer for the Virginia Department of Corrections in Fairfax. I'm also the co-chair of the Fairfax Reentry Council. And I, again, just thank you for being here. I'm going to pass it over to Vincent Smith to introduce himself, and then to our moderator, Sean Zimmerman.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Vincent Smith. I'm a senior staff attorney with Legal Services of Northern Virginia, and I have the pleasure of co-chairing the council as well. So thank you so much for coming. I'm really excited about the panel here today.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Sean Zimmerman. I am a certified vocational evaluator for DARS. We work with people with disabilities in relation to employment. But in case, I'm a part of the steering committee, and we are so grateful that you're all presentation. I will be monitoring the chat. And so if you just want to let me know when it's your turn, if you would prefer questions to be at the end, or if you want me to interrupt you, whatever works, I'm here for you.
Great, fantastic. Well, then I'll just sort of quickly go over the panel members that we do have in attendance. There will be brief introductions for each panel member as they present, but we have Lisa Potter, Dr. Olivia Bentley, Christina Manning, and Kristen Nickens. So thank you all for being here so much, and we will go ahead and get started.
So Dr. Bentley, I think you're up, and I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself.
All right, I'm gonna pull some slides up too. Good afternoon, everybody. Really glad to be with you all here at the Reentry Council. My beginning of my career, I spent as a substance use counselor back in Kentucky, and I was involved in our Reentry Council there because a lot of my clients, as I'm sure they are in Fairfax, a lot of my clients were also involved with the legal system. So I am a licensed professional counselor. I have my doctorate in counseling, and I love working with the reentry community. So again, just really glad to be here. I'm going to talk a little bit about just an overview of some of the common mental health issues that we see in this community, and some of the treatments that are currently recommended for treating some of those mental health issues. So feel free to put things in the chat as they come up as questions, since it sounds like Sean's going to be monitoring that. So just to start us off, I always kind of like to incorporate some sort of reflection piece. I'm not going to make anybody share any of these out loud. I just want you to check in with yourself about any beliefs, biases, anything pre-existing notions you have about trauma or mental health issues. I know sometimes we get a lot of these opinions and belief systems about mental health from maybe family members who have experienced these issues, both positive and negative, right? So sometimes if we have family members or friends in our lives who have experienced mental health issues, or if we've experienced them ourselves, sometimes that gives us a great deal of empathy for people when we encounter them in our work. But sometimes it makes us also a little bit more frustrated with them too, right? Because we see that, we've experienced that on a very personal level. So a lot of different ways that we can be influenced in the way that we believe things about our clients, and then and how those impact the people that we're working with. And just as a disclaimer, I use the word clients because that's kind of what I'm comfortable with, but insert, returning citizens or however you refer to people. But I think that in this Reentry Council, we have a really powerful way, and what a good time to talk about mental health. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, but we have such a power to normalize conversations and reduce stigma so that the people we work with are actually getting help for things, and hopefully we can help support them to get that help that they need. So some things that we know that nearly 1 in 3 adults has had a substance use disorder or any mental illness in the past year. So this is recent data. We know that pretty consistently over the years, anxiety, depression, PTSD, and bipolar disorder are the most common mental health issues that people really around the world are facing. Depression is the #1 cause of disability in the world. So these are, issues that I'm sure you all are seeing in the populations that you're serving as well. And these symptoms kind of come up in very different ways. We know that, again, no surprise, there are higher rates of mental health issues among adults who are on probation and parole. And so you all are really on the front line seeing these issues play out and seeing how they interact with the legal system and the ways that they're remaining compliant with their probation and parole. We also know that kind of overlaying on top of those mental health issues, we know that trauma as an experience is extremely common. The statistic that used to always get touted was 70%. Around 70% of people have experienced some type of traumatic event. And that doesn't mean that they're going to develop PTSD. That just means they've experienced some type of trauma. And I've listed the examples of some of these traumatic events here just to kind of give you an idea, because I think that sometimes when we talk about trauma, we think of kind of the big ones that come to our mind, which is childhood abuse and neglect, and then like some type of physical or sexual abuse. I think those are the ones, and then perhaps like military combat. Those are the ones that kind of pop into our minds very quickly, typically, but those are not at all as many types of traumatic events as have been experienced. And so one thing that I also want to remind ourselves is that the COVID-19 pandemic was a traumatic event, right? And so we've all been, I think that 70% is no longer accurate, because I'd say 100% of us have now experienced a traumatic event in our lives. And there's ways that still impacts us, right? Even if we didn't develop PTSD as a result of experiencing that trauma, there's ways that we still, are impacted by what we went through, right? Maybe maybe we're a little bit more careful with our goodbyes with loved ones because we're not sure when we'll see them again. Maybe, I don't know if anybody else is still kind of stockpiling toilet paper, but I'm still, that's still in the back of my mind, like can't run out of toilet paper. So whatever, as trivial as some of these things are, there's ways that trauma impacts us regardless of how severe it is. And just working with the population that you all are working with, incarceration is a type of a traumatic event, which I'm sure is not a surprise to you all, but it's important to remember that the people that we're working with have experienced trauma, and probably multiple types of trauma. And those can sometimes cause mental health issues, or just cause different ways that people interact interpersonally. So again, just to kind of some statistics, I know that when I was working in substance abuse treatment with my clients who were mostly on probation and parole, I think I could count on one hand the number of people who hadn't experienced some type of emotional, physical, or sexual abuse, right? It was very common for them to have experienced some very personal forms of trauma. And so the stats that are on here, 90% of clients in behavioral health public settings, 80% in psychiatric hospitals, 66% in substance abuse treatment programs. These are all the people that you're serving, right? I'm assuming there's lots of overlap here. And so just as a reminder that I'll talk in kind of the next portion of the panel about trauma-informed approaches. And even though that's typically thought of in a healthcare setting, there's so many ways we can apply that to any type of human services setting that we're in, and how we work and interact with clients. So there's many ways that we kind of are finding out about these mental health issues, right? Sometimes it comes to us easy. We know that the people that come through our door have some type of diagnosis because they've done a screening or assessment. They come to us with paperwork, right? A history, but sometimes there could be some behaviors that got missed. And so we're recognizing them for the first times. And so it could even present as non-compliance or resistance with their probation and parole requirements or their treatment requirements. I know that that happened a lot. And when I was doing work is that, you know, people with some severe trauma histories or some mental health issues, they may not be quite so good at following the rules, right? And so we may have to have some complicated and sensitive conversations with them and keep in mind, you know, the barriers to compliance that those mental health issues are causing. I think changes in behaviors is an important one for us to pay attention to. Again, you all are seeing these clients regularly, so sometimes you may be the first to notice a change in behavior. If somebody's becoming depressed or they're all of a sudden having some psychotic symptoms for the first time, we know that that happens particularly in our young people, right? 18 to 25 is a particularly high risk period for the development of some pretty severe mental illnesses. And so if we know kind of what looks typical for that particular client and they come in one day and they're acting completely different, you know, we might be the first people who are going to notice that. And then we should always be anticipating that any type of transition, whether that's transitioning out of prison, whether that's a transition associated with, you know, an interpersonal relationship change or getting a job or losing a job, whatever that transition is, we should always anticipate there's going to be increased stress, and that could put, you know, more mental health symptoms at an increase. So kind of be on alert when those type of things happen. And then just to highlight, when we are referring people to help for their mental health issues, typically we're going to do medication and psychotherapy are going to be for kind of the first line of defense for pretty much all of the common mental health issues that I presented before. So depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, PTSD, with some, you know, being heavy on medication. For example, people with bipolar disorder are most likely going to be put on some type of medication. And then, you know, kind of on the opposite side of things, people with PTSD you're probably going to see them be going through psychotherapy first, and then maybe treating some symptoms with medication too. And I did just list some of the evidence-based practices that they have a lot of research supporting right now. So if you see these programs, and I know a lot of these programs are pretty common in Virginia, I know they were in Kentucky as well. You know, the supported employment, permanent housing, cognitive behavioral therapy, motivational interviewing, these have been found to be really effective with this population in particular. And if you want to read more about that, hopefully they can send out my slides to you all, or you can email me and I'll give you my slides. But there's some great resources in my references that talk a little bit more about what these look like in people who are involved in the justice system. But I think that's it for me for now. So I'll hand it back off to somebody else.
Great, that was great. Thank you so much, Dr. Bentley. Next up, we have, or does anybody have any questions before we move on for Dr. Bentley? No? All right, so next up, we have Lisa Potter, who has worked for Fairfax County government for over 25 years in various clinical and administrative positions. She is currently the Fairfax County Director of Diversion Initiatives, which includes the Opioid and Substance Abuse Task Force and Diversion First. Lisa's work overseeing Diversion First spans multiple systems, including health and human services, public safety, and the courts to address the intersection of behavioral health and the criminal justice system. Lisa?
Hi, thank you so much. And good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for inviting me to join you today to talk about Diversion First. Some of you, and hopefully many of you, are familiar with Diversion First, which offers alternatives to incarceration for people with mental illness, substance use disorders, and/or developmental disabilities who come into contact with the criminal justice system for low-level offenses. Diversion is a cross-system initiative which was designed to really prevent repeat encounters or hopefully avoid encounters with the criminal justice system, improve public safety, promote a healthier community, and also provide a more effective and efficient use of county resources. And certainly most importantly, to provide services and supports to people who really need them most. Diversion First began over 8 years ago. And at that point, county leaders came together to address the intersection between the criminal justice system and behavioral health, and really envisioned a continuum of care that spanned across the entire criminal justice system. In the summer of 2015, the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors adopted a resolution to support the National Stepping Up initiative to reduce the number of people with mental illness in jails and decriminalize mental illness. And the first Diversion First services launched on January 1st, 2016. So we're 8 years in, and tremendous progress has been made since that time. Fairfax County has been recognized as a national Stepping Up Innovator County, which Fairfax is one of 43 counties in the country that rises to the level of that innovator status. And the initiative and all of the work to make that happen is the result of tremendous commitment and collaboration between partners across the public safety system, health and human services, the courts, a number of other county agencies, including the Department of Information Technology, the Office of the County Attorney. Many of you on this call have been an integral part of Diversion First. I have to give a shout out to Lori Yeager, who was the first person who was in this position, that sort of boundary spanner position, and really launched Diversion from the beginning. So there are a lot of people, not only on this call, but throughout the county and the community, who have really made this a reality over the last several years. So Diversion isn't really a singular program. It's really more of a philosophy, an approach, and it's an umbrella that encompasses a variety of different services. I'm going to give you a little bit of an update on what's happening in Diversion, and I'll tell you that I'm not going to be able to do justice to all of the programs and services, so it's a little bit of a sampler platter. But if you want additional information, there's a slide at the end that will point you to the Diversion First website, and folks can certainly feel free to contact me directly. Vincent, do you have my slides? Or Sean?
Yes, I can pull them up.
Awesome, thank you.
Give me 1 second. The behavioral health crisis.
No, the Diversion
Okay.
First.
Yeah. There we go. Sorry,
Thank you.
my eyeballs apparently aren't working. Okay, oops. Here we go. What is it? Slide?
That's it. And well, we're already up to slide 3. Perfect, thank you. So what you are seeing on this slide is the sequential intercept model. And from the beginning, Fairfax County leaders really felt strongly that we needed that full continuum of services. And along with a lot of other jurisdictions throughout the country, we use this model as a framework to inform strategies, community-based programs related to the involvement of people with behavioral health issues who are involved in the criminal justice system. So this model identifies how people flow through the criminal justice system along 6 distinct intercept points, each with the possibility for intervention. So it's not necessarily a linear model. People could start out with some sort of involvement in one intercept point, and they may touch other intercept points, which is why it's so important to have a continuum of services. So I'll briefly walk through each of the intercept points and give some examples of services at each point. Next slide, please. Thank you. So intercept 0 is the earliest possible point of intervention. And as part of Diversion First, thousands of first responders have received crisis intervention team training, which is a 40-hour training, and mental health first aid training, and both provide information on identifying, responding to a behavioral health situation. So this was really foundational when Diversion First started, and this 40-hour CIT training, many thousands of law enforcement officers and first responders have taken this training. And then the mental health first aid training is not only offered to first responders, but if any of you are interested, that's also offered to community members. As part of Intercept 0, there are a series of crisis response, community-based crisis response services. Christine is going to touch a little bit more on overall crisis response, but just to give you a little snapshot, mobile crisis units have been in the community for 30 plus years, and they involve a CSB or Community Services Board clinician providing on-scene evaluation, treatment, and crisis intervention in the community, typically for folks who are unwilling or unable to seek mental health treatment services on their own. Also, most recently, we have some co-responder teams that are comprised of a CIT trained police officer and a CSB clinician who ride together and respond to behavioral health related calls for service. So if someone calls 911 or the non-emergency line, they need some support for a behavioral health issue, a co-responder team can be sent out in the community. The community response team includes a fire and rescue technician and a CSB clinician, and often a peer support specialist who provide outreach to community members who are frequent utilizers of public safety services and have unmet behavioral health and medical needs. So the team goes out, tries to engage folks, provide resources, and help them get linked up to services that may lead to less interaction with public safety. So we have a number of folks who may call 911 many times. They don't really need a public safety response, but they need help with behavioral health issues. So this team really helps to provide engagement, outreach, and some care coordination. So all of these services are really part of the behavioral health crisis response system, which you'll hear more about in part 2 of the presentations this afternoon. Okay, the next slide represents Intercept 1, and the Merrifield Crisis Response Center, or MCRC, is located at the Sharon Bulova Center for Community Health. And many of you may know this. It used to be called the Merrifield Center, and it was renamed last year to the Sharon Bulova Center for Community Mental Health. The MCRC was really the very first inaugural Diversion First program, and it's a partnership between police officers, sheriff's deputies, and Community Services Board clinicians who work side by side. The MCRC is a CIT assessment site, meaning that law enforcement officers can bring people to the MCRC in lieu of arrest. So if an officer is in the community and responds to a call for somebody who is involved with, say, trespassing, and the officer believes that the person could really be better served because maybe they have a behavioral health issue with behavioral health services, that officer can take the individual to the Merrifield Crisis Response Center. CIT trained officers and deputy sheriffs are on duty 24/7. They can also accept custody if someone is under an emergency custody order, meaning they may be a danger to themselves or others, or maybe they lack the capacity to provide for their own basic needs. And also individuals can be transferred to the MCRC because an officer in the community recognizes that somebody needs help. They're not in custody, they may not be arrested, they won't be arrested, but the officer says, I know a place where you can get some help. Would you like me to take you? So each year we have over 2,000 people who are transported to the MCRC by law enforcement officers. And since 2016, over 3,200 people have been diverted from potential arrest. Once someone arrives at the MCRC, CSB clinicians provide crisis intervention, assessment, peer support, medication management, 23-hour beds, and a variety of other services to help people in crisis. Okay, next slide, please. At intercepts 2 and 3, this really involves the beginning of deeper end involvement in the criminal justice system. So while the earlier intercept points are really aimed at avoiding arrest, if someone is arrested, there are services to provide help and hopefully decrease any repeat encounters. Pre-trial services are offered through court services, and they provide a supervised release program, which provides intensive supervision in the community in lieu of incarceration. And the SRP, or supervised release program, links people to services and also reduces the number of days in jail. If people are booked into the adult detention center, through the medical screening process, each individual receives a brief jail mental health screening and also a NIDA assist screening, which is for substance use disorders. So both of these screenings are standardized tools. They were incorporated into the booking process years ago, and it really provides an opportunity to identify at the very earliest stage who may be in need of services, and then those referrals can be made to staff working in the jail who provide behavioral health services. Jail-based services are in a partnership between the Community Services Board and the Sheriff's Office. Services include crisis intervention, psychiatric medications, medication for opioid use disorder, with linkages post-release to the Community Services Board's Addiction Medicine Clinic for ongoing care. The Striving to Achieve Recovery, or STAR program, is a jail-based addiction treatment and recovery program established by Sheriff Kincaid several years ago. It's a peer-led program with support from the jail-based behavioral health team and medical teams, and provides recovery skills, fosters accountability, instills hope, and provides community resources upon release. And one thing that's really unique about this program is, in a lot of other jail-based addiction recovery programs, once the program is completed, people go back to general population. They may be housed together for a period of time, but then when the program ends, they're no longer housed together. The STAR program is really unique in that people will stay in the STAR unit for the duration of the time they're incarcerated. Also provided in the adult detention center, peer supports. And peer supports are really embedded throughout diversion first programs. But particularly there is a partnership between the Chris Outwood Foundation, where peer recovery specialists offer connections, support during incarceration and also post-release. And finally, at Intercept 3, there are 3 specialty dockets, Veterans Treatment Docket, Drug Court, and Mental Health Docket, that provide a very structured process integrating treatment and court supervision that really provides a path out of the criminal justice system. These are really intensive programs. And if you've never been to a docket graduation, I really encourage you to attend, because they're incredibly inspirational. And you really get to see how much people have grown and learned and are on just such a different path to recovery as a result. Okay, next slide, please. In terms of reentry services, there are a number that are provided by the CSB and also the Sheriff's Office. Pre-release case management, linkages to community-based services, and also jail diversion teams provide services for folks post-release in the community. There are a variety of treatment options. Certainly the Community Services Board and the CSB also works with other community providers Many of you in this meeting are part of that continuum of community-based care, treatment, and other resources. I've mentioned peer supports embedded throughout, and also the Diversion First continuum includes housing. There are currently 37 housing units, and Diversion First Housing is a partnership with New Hope Housing to provide permanent supportive housing. So folks who enter Diversion First Housing tend to stay for a significant period of time, which is great because it offers tremendous stability and independence. And the last data that I saw, 94% who were involved in Diversion First Housing remained there, and over 90% had 0 psychiatric hospitalizations or interactions with the criminal justice system after entering housing. Okay, next slide, please. So a couple things on the horizon. Certainly, we will continue to focus on all of the intercept points as all of the programs grow, and I'm thinking specifically right now of the specialty dockets. We want to be able to keep pace with how many people are interested in the programs and how many we're able to serve. And we need to continue to do that across all of the programs. Specifically at the crisis response area, this year we'll be expanding the co-responder teams as well as the community response team, offering a greater presence in the community. And one thing of special note for this group, the Diversion and Community Reentry Center. We've been working on this for a number of years, and in the short term, there will be a diversion center or a reentry center as part of what's being called Building 1 as part of the Judicial Center Complex redesign. So in phase 1, in the next couple of years, when Building 1 is up and running, there will be a community reentry center, which is great. And many of the folks in this group will be partners in that endeavor. And long-term, in a later phase of the judicial complex redesign, we've envisioned a reentry center that also has a diversion section and a housing section. So it'll be a 3-pronged center offering lots of services and supports, some temporary and a little bit of permanent supportive housing. So that's something really exciting on the horizon. A few more years down the road. And we will continue to collaborate with all of our national partners to make sure that we learn from and share best practices, resources, strategies, and use all that information to help inform our local practices. Final slide, please. So if you're interested in more information, I encourage you to check out the Diversion First website. It has all of our annual reports, the 2022 annual report coming soon. And you can also feel free to contact me directly. My contact number is listed here, or my email, lisa.potter@fairfaxcounty.gov. Feel free to reach out at any time, and I'm happy to connect you with the right people or give you some information about the program. So that's it for me. Thank you so much for your time.
Great, thank you, Lisa. Does anybody have any questions for Lisa as we get prepared for the next one? Sorry, give me 1 second here, guys. All right, so next up is the introduction is District Mental Health Clinician Kristen Nickens has been employed by the Department of Corrections for nearly 5 years with territory encompassing Fairfax County, Arlington County, and Alexandria City. Kristen brings more than 20 years of experience to this position and has worked previously with adjudicated youth and long-term residential treatment, adults in outpatient medication-assisted substance abuse treatment, and individuals with traumatic and acquired brain injuries, veterans in the Department of Defense's Wounded Warrior Project, and individuals with serious mental health conditions and involvement in the criminal justice system at the Fairfax Falls Church CSB. Kristen is passionate about her work with the forensic population as well as educating others about mental health conditions and is honored to be a part of today's panel. Let me just pull up let me share the screen. Just give me 1 second, please.
Thank you, Sean.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So good afternoon, everyone. I realize that many folks here have seen my face or maybe have seen my name, but not known quite who I was or how my position is different from the rest of the officers that you might interact with in our office. So today is a good opportunity, and thank you, Officer Sweeney, for inviting me to come speak with you so that I can describe kind of what I do, what my role is, and how I might be able to help. So here I am, district mental health clinician. So a little bit of background about mental health and specifically the Department of Corrections. So it's no wonder that lots of folks in our system have mental health conditions. And there is a pretty significant population of mental health staff who are working in our institutions, but there are very few working in the community. So several years ago, and I got kind of different numbers. Some said 2006, some said 2007, some said 2008, so I went with 2008. In roughly 2008, 3 regional mental health clinicians were hired for the entire state. So the state was broken into 3 parts, right? Western, Central, and Eastern. We happen to be in the Central region. And those folks were doing kind of the catch-all mental health work for our folks who are being released from our institutions back into the communities. This is a very, very unique approach. And you may or may not know that Virginia is the only state in the country that has mental health staff embedded in probation and parole offices. So this is a very unique thing. And this actually led to us, so the Council for State Governments Justice Center actually has a program. They're partnering with the Department of Justice to study places where there is an intersection between, the criminal justice system and the mental health system. And given our really unique approach to this process, we were actually selected to be one of the learning sites, 12 learning sites in the country. Virginia is one of them, which is really exciting for us. This gives us an opportunity to shine, right? To do a little bit of bragging about what we do that's so unique, how we contribute. And also an opportunity to help other states replicate our model so that this kind of momentum spreads. So as you know, like I said, there were originally three regional mental health clinicians who were very quickly overwhelmed with the amount of referrals they were getting in terms of folks being released from institutions back into our communities and needing more support. So somewhere in 2015, 2016, the state was able to give us some more positions and they started to hire district mental health clinicians. So I am one of 25 district mental health clinicians in the state. I think personally that we're DOC's best kept secret, but I'm happy to be here today talking with each of you and kind of spreading the word about who we are and what we do because it's very important work. So as I said, the state has been divided into 3 regions. Here in the central region, there are 8 of us working as district mental health clinicians to cover 15 districts. And as we said, I have Fairfax County, Arlington County, and Alexandria City. And I also have the Northern Virginia Mental Health Institute. So if there are folks on supervision elsewhere in the state, but they happen to be hospitalized in my territory, so to speak, those would also be cases that I follow. And that actually happens more than you would believe. But I do have a fair share of folks who end up at the institute that I'm also following along with to make sure that their treatment is going okay and to monitor how things are going. Next slide, please. So admittedly, the least favorite part of my discussion about my position is trying to describe what I do. The wonderful thing about our position is that we have a lot of freedom. We have the ability to put our stamp on our positions, and because they are relatively new, we have we can, think outside the box, be very creative about what we do, how we implement things, and really how we operate day to day in our districts.
And also acknowledging that each of our districts is very different in terms of its demographics, in terms of its resources. So having that flexibility is something that's very good for us. So to try to make my job, I guess, more concrete, I wanted to list off some things that I typically do on a day-to-day basis. So for lots of folks, there's a need just for somebody to talk to, right? And they may not know where to start. They may have had no mental health treatment, or maybe they've been someplace and had a not so great experience with mental health treatment. So this is an opportunity for me to put maybe a friendlier face on the profession of mental health and to give these folks another opportunity to engage in appropriate treatment. So there is kind of that short-term communication, that short-term relationship. I'm the interim person in the gap between maybe their release from jail or their release from an institution and their connection to a longer-term treatment provider. If folks show up in our office and they happen to be in the midst of a crisis, that's also something that I can help with as well, right? That de-escalation piece, that figuring out of if we need to put a safety plan in place, what does that look like? What resource do we need to connect you to make sure that you are safe and getting what you need? I also regularly do the court-ordered and special condition mental health assessments, essentially just to figure out what else does this person need, right? We know when people are better, they do better, right? And the idea is not to be on probation forever. So that's a valuable part of the process. Folks may need help applying with benefits of entitlement. They don't have Medicaid, they don't have SNAP. They need to know how to go about that process. If they need help with the actual process, that's something that I can do. And lots of just connections to other resources. I get requests for all kinds of odd stuff, which is, I guess, hard for me to explain or hard for me to capture, but it's definitely part of what I do as well. And my slides went away. There we go, perfect. And then the last part is kind of the psychoeducation part, which is helping folks understand the signs and symptoms that they may be experiencing, what kinds of conditions those may be associated with, and what that means for them in terms of resources, treatment, or support. So that is a very important piece of what I do. So in terms of numbers, and I guarantee you, I didn't make these numbers up, but in 2022, I had 555 interactions with probationers. So for any of these, duties kind of that I've discussed, it could be any combination of those things. But in my districts, there were 555 of those in 1 year. Another important thing that I provide in terms of duties or responsibilities is support for probation officers. So again, lots of times we're having, the consultation at the water cooler, so to speak, about so-and-so showed up in this office and they were behaving this way, or, this is happening and I need to understand what it is. So again, lots of psychoeducation and training, right? Helping officers identify resources. If someone maybe says, my guy just got a job, but he doesn't know where to get work-related clothing. There's a resource for that, right? Let me help you get connected. Let me help you, bridge that gap so that person gets what they need. It may not be purely mental health related, but it is definitely a reentry issue, right? And something that we need to, again, bridge that gap. Something else I do often is communicate with other mental health providers and other agencies. So this could be largely the CSB. This could be other private providers. If folks have a private therapist or private psychiatrist or elsewhere in the community, if I need to get medical records, if I need to kind of interpret medical records and make them make sense, that's something that I'm happy to do too. And again, a very nice round number, I have to say. In 2022, there were 333 instances of those interactions that I had with probation officers. Next slide, please. And then here's kind of another just kind of short laundry list of other things that I do. Again, a lot of collaboration with other agencies in terms of finding appropriate resources, making those referrals, communicating with folks about, if they've been in the hospital, do they have a discharge plan? What does that look like? How are they doing in terms of engaging in treatment if they're hospitalized? If they need help getting connected to OAR, right? They're applying for benefits of entitlement, DSS, DMAS, Social Security Administration, all of those things. Another thing that is behind the scenes that people don't see or that we don't talk about a lot is our folks who are in institutions who are going to be coming back into the community. Lots of folks have, serious mental illnesses. They may come out with no home plan, right? This fella or this lady is going to be back on our street, very vulnerable with no resources. Our phrase in DOC is problematic releases. I'm not sure that I actually like that phrase, but it is what it is. But part of my process is helping those folks. How can we get you into a shelter, right? Can we do a shelter screening before you are released? What kinds of resources or supports can we get in place so that the day you show up in Fairfax County, you get off the van, right? And you're back. What can we do to make sure that you're safe and that you're getting connected, you have what you need, and you're okay. Very frequently new staff orientation. So I have lots of conversations, especially with new staff who may be new to probation, or they may not have much experience working with folks with mental health conditions. That's a good opportunity for me to give them some tips and tricks so they know kind of what they're looking for, what resources are out there, and how to best reach me, or what we can talk about in order to make sure they're getting their folks connected. Every month at our staff meeting, we have a mental health moment, which is usually just a quick opportunity for me to share a resource, something I've learned from a training that I went to, something that I picked up along the way, something that is a tangible, specific thing that I can pass on to officers that they can use, hopefully, in their day-to-day work with their probationers. And then quarterly, we have in-service trainings, and those can be, we've done a bunch of different ones. I'm trying to think of the last couple. So we've done vicarious trauma, we've done mental health stigma, we've done borderline personality disorder, we've done bipolar disorder. There's been a lot. So those are just a few. But those topics are driven by the interest of the probation officers, what they'd like to learn more about, what they're curious about. That's something else that I can provide for them. And I think I have one more slide for this part of our, yes. So in terms of identifying who might be folks to refer to me, are folks who are in institutions. If they are taking psych meds when they are released, we get this institutional discharge form. It goes to us and to the CSB as well to say, hey, in about 45 days, you have this person coming down the pike. They're going to be coming back into the community with or without a home plan, with or without resources, but they're going to need help getting connected to mental health services and having ongoing access to their psychiatric medication. So that's something that we work with frequently. Officers also do a community mental health screening for our folks who are coming out of jail to help us figure out, it's about 12 questions, but it kind of helps us filter out who might need more help getting acclimated as they're going through the probation process. We also do something called mental health codes or community mental health codes. This is basically a scale 0 to 4 that helps us a very kind of quick and dirty snapshot of where someone's mental health is at, right? With 0 being no mental health needs or no mental health treatment history, and 4 being pretty extreme history, right? Or pretty high current needs. We're also going to be adding a new form to our intake packet that will help us gather more information right from day one about where folks are on the day of their intake, so that we can more quickly snag those folks to make sure they're getting connected in a proactive way, right? Rather than waiting until something's happening and we're trying to clean up a crisis. We want to know right from the beginning, if we don't have any of this other information, how do we get these folks, get their information and get them connected? We also have tons of information, especially local jurisdictions that ask for pre-sentencing investigations. There's usually tons of information in those that's very helpful. So when we know, again, that someone is being released to us, we have that opportunity to review that document and say, oh, someone has this history of, hospitalizations here or medication here. It's just someone that we need to follow up with to see how they're doing when they're coming back home. And mental health cheat sheets is the last thing. I'm going to talk about it in the second part of our conversation today, but it is something that I've given officers just as a way to, I guess, maybe help them identify who might be good referrals, who might be in need of more support, and how to get them connected.
Great, thank you so much. All right. And we now have Christina Manning, who's the Director of the Project Management Office at the Fairfax Falls Church Community Services Board. She has led the development of a multi-agency behavioral health crisis response system that included public safety agencies, 911 and behavioral health agencies in the greater Fairfax County area. The system compiles with Marcus Alert legislation in Virginia and helps to ensure behavioral health response to behavioral health situations in our community. Give me 1 second, please.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
It's great to be with you all today. I'm excited to share with you some information about our behavioral health crisis response system. And we can go ahead and move to the first slide. So a behavioral health crisis response is required by the Marcus David Peters Act in Virginia. It's commonly known as Marcus Alert, and it's a Virginia state law that was named for a young Black biology teacher who was killed by Richmond police in 2018 during a mental health crisis. The law requires public safety and behavioral health agencies in Virginia to coordinate responses to behavioral health emergencies, and most importantly, to divert individuals to behavioral health care whenever feasible. Implementation is being phased in of Marcus Alert statewide through the year 2028. So each community is coming online with Marcus Alert requirements little by little. The Fairfax County area is implementing this summer in 2023, and the Marcus Alert requirements in state law are being implemented for us locally. We're referring to it as the Fairfax Behavioral Health Crisis Response System. What you see on the screen right now is the vision for crisis response. The long-term vision includes someone to talk to, someone to respond, and someplace to go with interconnectivity between all of those pieces. Someone to talk to includes crisis lines like 988. That's the new national 3-digit number for behavioral health assistance. It also includes 911. And we're building a crisis response system with interconnectivity between 988 and 911 or our regional crisis call center, so that when someone calls 911 in need of help, they get the best and consistent behavioral health assistance we have in our community to offer. Someone to respond includes crisis intervention team trained police officers. It also includes the co-responder teams that Lisa spoke of, mobile crisis teams of clinicians. We're building a crisis response system that sends the right response at the right time in Fairfax. And then someplace to go. That includes the Merrifield Crisis Response Center that Lisa mentioned. It also includes crisis stabilization units and the Fairfax Detoxification Center. These are all alternatives to a hospital emergency room and are far more effective in behavioral health treatment. We're finding opportunities to expand all of these resources and ensure this connectivity between all parts of our crisis response system. And let's look at that crisis response system on the next slide. Here you see the components of our Fairfax Behavioral Health Crisis Response System. It is an evolving system. In 2023, we're going to integrate the Regional Crisis Call Center and regional mobile teams into this system here in Fairfax County. These are additional resources for someone to talk to and someone to respond that are required in that Marcus Alert state code I mentioned. The Regional Crisis Call Center is a state-funded 24/7 behavioral health crisis line that's operated by PRS Inc. They're a local nonprofit behavioral health provider that many of you probably know very well. PRS is also an answering point for the national 988 number for behavioral health assistance. The regional mobile crisis teams are also state funded. We'll also be bringing them online into this system this summer. And they provide in-person response to both adults and youth. Improvements to this system will continue to occur over time, And this year we're focusing on greater interconnectivity and communication between all these components that you see here. I want to dive a little bit more into the vision. So if we can move to the next slide. Thank you. So as I said, the vision is someone to talk to, someone to respond, and someplace to go. Here, I want to talk a little bit more about someone to talk to, because the Regional Crisis Call Center fulfills that vision of someone to talk to and serves as a hub for us for access to behavioral health care across our system. In addition to operating regionally here in Northern Virginia, PRS that operates this call center is also part of the National 988 system, as I said. And as such, they're operating right now and are available 24/7 by talk, text, or chat. Calling the Regional Crisis Call Center is the place you call when you or someone you know is at risk of harm or in a mental health crisis, but they're not in immediate danger. It's for situations like when there's no life-threatening situation in the moment or a need for a public safety response. It's also for situations like when there is a suicidal thought, but there's no plan or means underway. And when you or someone you care about is having difficulty coping with day-to-day stressors, the Regional Crisis Call Center would be the place to call, as well as when you're worried about yourself or someone else, and you're just looking for resources or help. All of those are very appropriate uses for the Regional Crisis Call Center or for 988. Starting in the summer of 2023, 911 and first responders are going to divert and assist people in connecting to the Regional Crisis Call Center. So a police officer on the scene will have the number right there to connect someone to the Regional Crisis Call Center when they encounter someone who may need behavioral health assistance. And the Regional Crisis Call Center and diversion to the call center, this is important to know, are required in that Marcus Alert state code. So having someone to talk to through the Regional Crisis Call Center is a critical component to our system for behavioral health response in our community. On the next slide, you see the call flow for the Regional Crisis Call Center. And I just want to point out here that most of the calls that go to the center can be resolved over the phone using de-escalation techniques and connections to resources. The call center also has the ability to address some more complex needs. They have care navigation and can assist and help people follow up with more acute needs that they may have. The call center also coordinates a mobile response to individuals in the community when it's warranted and desired by the person, and especially when there's no imminent safety concerns. But when there are imminent safety concerns, the call center has an established relationship with 911 to initiate that public safety response. And on the next slide, thank you. A little bit more about 911. Of course, 911 is part of our behavioral health crisis response system because 911 is often the first contact for someone in crisis. At 911, we have crisis intervention team trained call takers. The training that those call takers receive mirrors the same crisis intervention techniques that are taught to police officers. The call takers at the call center beginning this summer will be triaging behavioral health calls and diverting calls, as I said, to the Regional Crisis Call Center whenever appropriate. And there are plans in place to have a behavioral health liaison on site at the county's main 911 center to assist call takers when there are behavioral health related 911 calls. Collaboration is occurring right now between the Regional Crisis Call Center and 911 to support each other, and most importantly, to help individuals with behavioral health concerns in our community. On the next slide, I want to talk a little bit more about someone to respond and how we're fulfilling that vision currently. Lisa talked about the co-responder teams. They are a critical component of our ability to offer someone to respond. Also, we have CIT officers. They're a tremendous asset and the largest resource we currently have available. In 2023, all the officers will have connections to the Regional Crisis Call Center and mobile teams so that those additional tools will be available to them to help with the response. We also have the mobile crisis teams that Lisa mentioned and the detox diversion outreach team. They're a mobile team of CSB staff who respond to police and community requests to intervene on the scene of a potential arrest and refer folks to detoxification services instead of arrest. All of these someone to respond options are 100% mobile, and we're trying to meet people wherever they may be in the community with our response. On the next slide, someplace to go. Someplace to go in a crisis is not a hospital emergency room. That's the goal here. And we are currently filling the someplace to go part of this long-term vision with the Sharon Bulova Center for Community Health, where we have, in addition to the Crisis Response Center, we have 23-hour bed program that provides 23 hours of crisis stabilization and nursing services. It's an alternative to inpatient psychiatric care. It's designed for those individuals who may need ongoing assessment and crisis intervention in a safe environment that's less restrictive than a hospital. We also have our Wellness Circle, which is operated by the CSB. It's a 16-bed short-term residential crisis stabilization unit, as well as RI International. It is also a short-stay crisis stabilization service. We have Fairfax Detoxification Center as another someplace to go. It provides services for adults with substance use concerns. It's operated by the CSB. We know that these someplace to go resources do not provide enough beds currently. The region is actively working towards establishment of crisis receiving centers and additional resources so that we can have enough places for someone to go. On the next slide, I just want to touch on a few of the post-crisis response programs that are available as part of our crisis care continuum. These are just a few examples. Lisa already mentioned the community response team for those frequent callers to 911. In addition to that, we also have the peer outreach response team. That's focused on individuals who have serious opioid or other substance use challenges. And this is a team of peers. They respond to people who have experienced an overdose or substance use emergency. They include certified peer recovery specialists with lived experience of mental health challenges and/or substance use disorders. Their goal is to build a powerful peer connection and support individuals in identifying and moving toward their recovery pathway. We also have 5 peer-run recovery centers throughout the county. These are places where people in recovery from mental illness and substance use disorders can go to find hope and tools to reach their goals. In 2023, we are working on improving all of the interconnectivity between all of the services on our continuum with the crisis response system. And I just want to close out my comments before I take any questions with a little public service announcement. You can help public safety first responders in a crisis by creating an emergency health profile. It's completely free. You can include there any critical health information that you would want shared with first responders who are attempting to help you when you've called 911. You can enter medical information there, emergency contact information, any background information that you may want a first responder to know, allergies. All of that information can be entered on your emergency health profile. And that information is maintained in association with the mobile phone number that you've registered on your profile. It's only available to 911 and first responders when you make that 911 call, and can really help in an emergency or a crisis. The link to make your emergency health profile is right there on the screen at www.fairfaxcounty.gov/911/health profile. And we're trying to get the word out so that we have that information available to help you and your family in a crisis. And with that, I'll take any questions that folks have about behavioral health crisis response in the county.
There's a question in the chat. It says, is the health profile something that is offered in other Virginia counties?
That's a great question. The health profile requirement was actually part of the Marcus Alert legislation. And as I mentioned in the beginning, that legislation is being implemented and phased in across Virginia communities through the year 2028. So a lot of communities have established the health profile, but a lot of them also have not. Locally here in Northern Virginia, we have it in Fairfax County, as well as Prince William County also has a health profile available. If you have an iPhone, you have the little heart app on your iPhone. That serves the same purpose as establishing a profile through this link that's provided on the screen. Yes, it is exceptionally helpful for for helping elderly parents. Yes, I have urged my own mother to make sure that all of her emergency contact information for myself and my sibling are on her phone, on her little heart app. Yes.
Great. Thank you so much. I guess we're going to go ahead and move on to part 2. So Dr. Bentley, you're up again.
All right, I'm back. Well, I honestly just want to keep my mouth shut and just keep listening to all the cool stuff that's going on in Virginia. I'm currently in District of Columbia, and I'm thinking about just walking myself over to Virginia soon because some really cool stuff going on. So thanks to my fellow panelists. Cool stuff. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about just how we respond to clients who have a history of trauma or mental health issues. I think my fellow panelists are going to give you even more resources about specific screening tools and things like that. But I'm just going to talk a little bit about how we are mindful of our interactions. So I mentioned that the trauma is something that we've all experienced, right? And that a lot of our clients have experienced in compounded ways, multiple different types of trauma, whether it's abuse on top of incarceration or experience with any type of violence. And so I'm pretty sure you all have probably heard of the fight or flight response at some point. And it's a really great survival instinct, right? So it keeps us safe. If we encounter a dangerous stimuli, it makes sure that we do whatever it takes to survive that moment. And it's great when it isn't enacted for that traumatic event. But the problem happens, and where we start seeing symptoms and mental health issues arise, is when that stress response persists long after the traumatic event has ended. And so that leads to, just in the most simplistic way, it leads to people perceiving threats everywhere and then not really being able to calm down their nervous system. They're not really being able or in their best frame of mind to determine how to react appropriately to just the most basic non-threatening stimuli. And so we're going to see that pop up in the way that we interact with them, regardless of what setting we're in. So just kind of some basic ways to be more trauma informed in our interactions. We want to always be sure that we're creating a safe and trusting environment. And so we can do that right from, our first interaction with people when they get into our offices, whatever that office looks like for you. Whether that's, you're a probation and parole officer, a mental health clinician, a DARS caseworker. We want to make sure that from the moment we see this person, that they feel safe in the environment that they're in with us. And so that means that we're using respectful language, right? This even means, I think, that we're respectful of our coworkers, right? Because when people come into our waiting rooms, walk past our offices, they see how we talk to people. And so wanting to make sure that we're being safe kind of in all of and supportive and respectful in all of our interactions. We also want to empower clients and give them autonomy as much as possible. We know that incarceration and even the ways that the requirements that we put in place for people after incarceration, a lot of power is taken away from them, right? And so as much as possible, we want to give them some type of control over their environment. I like to give an example of one simple way to do that is to ask if people want the door open or shut when they come into our office, if that's something that you can offer, right? Like any small choice that you can give somebody that helps them gain some control over their environment can be really meaningful and just indicates that you are taking the extra step to create that safe and trusting environment. It means, letting the client choose where they want to sit in your office. Some people who have experienced trauma or are having some paranoid mental health symptoms, they may feel more comfortable if they're closest to the exit. And so if that's something we can accommodate, that's going to just set us up for success in the way we interact with them. We also just in general want to use a strengths-based approach. This is good for anybody, right? We always want to focus on the ways that people are doing well and are resilient as opposed to focusing on deficits. And that can so often be a focus when we're working with the reentry population too, right? They have so many barriers, whether they're coming to us because they can't find a job and they just keep hitting roadblocks because of their criminal background. I know sometimes I have to just sit with clients and have them make a list of all the strengths that they have just so that they can think of them, right? So that they can communicate those to other people. So we want to always be focusing on the strengths, the resilience. We want to use language that mirrors that as well. So that means, focusing on talking about people as survivors instead of victims. Just small shifts in the way we talk about people and talk to people can be really meaningful. We want to be collaborative, not just with our clients, but with our other partners. So that's why I love reentry councils or any type of environment where we can meet with other people who work with the same clients that we do, right? So that we can easily call somebody up if we want to refer to them to services or just know more about the services that are available in our community. So just being involved on this call right now, I think it's just to check off the collaborate checklist in the trauma-informed care principles. And then lastly, and this one takes some time and can be the most difficult, we want to examine our own belief systems and then the systems that we practice in to think about ways that we can avoid re-traumatization. So again, if we're talking about incarceration as being a type of trauma, what can we do, since we know that, what can we do, on a personal level, but then also, on a larger societal level, what can we do to make changes so that we are not making it any more difficult for our clients that have already been somewhat traumatized by that legal system? How can we, make it better and support the recovery through our interactions with them? I know this is a tall order, but that's why being trauma informed is not like an easy checklist. It really is a continuum of our the way that we interact, and we're always going to be learning ways that we can be more trauma informed as we continue on in our careers. I know that, you know, if you look at me 10 years ago and me now, there's so many things I've learned along the way that have helped me to be more mindful of being trauma informed and working with people with mental health issues. So these are just kind of a catch-all. Like I said, most common mental health issues that I mentioned at the beginning: anxiety, depression, PTSD, and bipolar disorder. These are kind of some catch-all symptoms that if we notice these, they might be kind of the beginnings of something, right? And included in there is the beginnings of maybe a suicide risk crisis as well. So if we notice some changes in sleep, people looking tired, then that could be an indication of something. Changes in appetite, we can kind of see the physical effects of that sometimes. Difficulty concentrating when they're in meetings with us. Maybe they're having difficulty enjoying things that they used to find enjoyable, keeping up with daily responsibilities like meeting with us, right? If we've got somebody who's been super compliant, never misses anything that we tell them to do, and then they start missing, like, there's something going on here. And so we're going to want to maybe think about, is there a mental health reason for some of these missed appointments? Increased drug or alcohol use, increased risky behaviors, all of these things, particularly if we're talking about thoughts of death, suicide, or self-harm, if that's getting communicated to us, if we're asking about that, and people aren't really giving us straight answers about, whether or not that's something they're thinking about, then we may want to take some steps to call some of those really great resources that were just mentioned before, 988 or crisis call center, things like that. Or Kristen, sounds like Kristen's really involved and is right there, which is so convenient. I wish I had a Kristen when I was working. I had our probation officer on speed dial, but having one in the office is just so great. So yeah, we might want to take some extra steps if we start noticing these kind of things. These are just, again, some very basic tips on how to connect people. I know sometimes, especially if we're not used to interacting with people in crisis, it can be a little anxiety provoking as we kind of get our footing and know what to say, right? So basic tips: ask open-ended questions, get information. What are they experiencing? How are they feeling? So open-ended questions are, avoiding those yes or no questions, so we're getting as much information as possible. We want to be supportive and, again, use that strengths-based approach, use those active listening skills. So that means that if somebody talks for a really long time, we maybe want to repeat back some of the things we heard to make sure we're tracking them a little bit. And then make sure that we get a plan for next steps before they walk out of our office, right? Does that mean that they're calling 988 when they're with us? Or does that mean that they're creating a safety plan that has 988 on the list of things they could do if they end up not feeling safe? Or are we calling a family member? Are we making a referral to a mental health clinician? Like, what are we doing? Let's make sure we have a plan. Just because, again, when somebody's in crisis, they're maybe not thinking quite as clearly or as great at making decisions as they might usually be. And so we want to kind of help them out with that. Make sure they have a clear way forward when they leave our office. And I do want to end, on a hopeful note, at least, that, recovery is possible. I know we all have the success stories, right, that keep us doing what we're doing. But the data that I was just looking at to prepare for this, I thought, man, these are even better numbers than I would have imagined. Like 67% and 72% of people who, used to have a mental health or substance use problem now consider themselves in recovery. So that's pretty great. That means that we can help people get to the other side of things. And again, if people want my slides, feel free to email me. I have a longer training on trauma-informed care where I talk more about the brain and the impact on that. And then always want to plug 988 since it's the new number, and some great resources that SAMHSA has as well. They've got a lot of really great fact sheets that you can download for free, print, hang up in your offices if you want some of these mental health signs and symptoms where you can see them every day. So that's it. Again, thank you for having me on this panel. I'm going to pass it back over to my wonderful panelists.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bentley. We really appreciate your topics today. So we just have one more. Let me get back. I think I didn't do that right. Nope. Hold on one second. Oop. And there we are. So Kristen, you're up.
Perfect, thank you. So the last slide that you saw was kind of a list of places where we have or get information about folks who are coming to us on probation. Now, that certainly doesn't capture all of the information that we need, right? And keep in mind, there's one of me for about 2,300 probationers in 3 districts. So my probation officers in my districts are my eyes and ears. And some of them have had a lot of experience, again, with mental health. Maybe they have had, studied it or had a prior experience in a job, or have had experience, in their current position as an officer. For those who haven't, something that I did was create kind of cheat sheets addressing our more common mental health conditions to help them maybe pick out folks who might be good to refer to me or to another resource. So I created cheat sheets for depression, for anxiety, for bipolar disorder, for schizophrenia, for PTSD, for borderline personality disorder, and for antisocial personality disorder, again, as those are the conditions that we see the most frequently. So the disclaimer kind of here at the top is again, reminding folks, I'm not trying to turn them into mini clinicians. I'm trying to give them some ideas about what kinds of behaviors or presentations that they might observe in a probationer that may be out of the ordinary, that may kind of make them think, what's this about? And do we need to do something with this information that we have, right? What's on the cheat sheets does not take the place of, professional help with a clinician or another source, but is again, just kind of an informational outlet for them. And again, context is important. So the thing that I stress is that if you've been developing a relationship with a probationer, maybe you've been working with them for 6 months, you kind of know what their baseline is, right? You kind of know how they typically show up in your office, how they communicate with you, how they respond to you. So there may be some softer signs of things that are kind of going, maybe the train is going off the track, right? We need to pay attention. Maybe not outright, diagnostic criteria, but some things that make us say, maybe we should pay some more attention. So again, context here is important. And if you'll go to the next slide, I've used the cheat sheet for depression as kind of an example. I don't know how much of this you can read, but the first section is basically kind of all of the conditions that would be considered or might fall under the umbrella of depression. Lots of folks will come to us and say, I've been diagnosed with depression. That can mean a couple of different things. So while we maybe don't need to get into the weeds about which particular diagnosis they have, I think it's good for the officers to understand there's kind of an array, right, of conditions that have at the core pretty similar characteristics, right? The second box there is about symptoms. So this is based on, put into layman's terms, what are the diagnostic criteria for, in this case, major depressive disorder? What would you expect? The third box there is other things that you may notice. So again, that's kind of the soft symptoms or maybe the other signs that based on context may indicate that something is up with this person that maybe we should pay attention to. If you go to the next slide, this box here at the top is a list of every antidepressant that I could put my finger on. So the brand name and the generic name. Lots of times folks come into us and they say, I've never been diagnosed with anything, but I'm taking X, Y, and Z, right? We know medications have odd names, that they have at least one X, Y, or Z in them, right? People may not recall what the medication is, or they may give us some garbled version of what the medication is. Sometimes based on those context clues, we can put it together and say, oh, you were prescribed Wellbutrin. So chances are you probably have been diagnosed with depression, right? Or a depressive condition, a mood disorder. This next box here is questions you might ask. And I think this is probably one of the most important things when we think about who to pick out or who to refer. And these questions really deal with intensity, duration, and frequency of what people report as symptoms, right? So if someone is in your office and they're saying, you know, man, I haven't been able to sleep, I can't get out of bed. How long has that been going on? Like forever? Like, I don't remember the last time I had an issue. You know, I had a good night's sleep. Okay. Does that get in the way of your life, right? How does that affect you day to day? Well, I mean, I don't get up and take my kids to school. And, you know, I've been, you know, written up, I've been fired because I can't make it to work, because when I do fall asleep, then I like sleep through the alarm clock, but I sleep through half the day. Okay. And that's been going on for a while. That's a pretty, you know, significant thing. So if you ask questions just basically about the intensity, the duration, and the frequency of that symptom, we might get an idea of who needs to be referred, or who we maybe need to investigate or have that conversation with them about. Have you talked to anybody about this? Would you be interested in talking to somebody about this? Like, this sounds like this disrupts your life, right? This is not a comfortable thing that you're experiencing. Maybe we should talk to somebody about it. And that opens up that conversation of like, okay, what resources do you have, right? And if you go on to the next slide is about resources, right? About where to refer folks. So if they are folks who don't have health insurance, we think they might be eligible. If they need help with the application process, they can be referred to me. If they're more kind of independent or savvy folks, I can give them, you know, the website or the phone number to call so that they can do that process on their own. And of course, always the thing that I try to stress is, regardless of someone's mental health history, always give them 988, always give them CSB emergency services. And also, if you're familiar with National Counseling Group, got a grant to operate the Community Regional Crisis Response, or CR2 program. So they do 24/7 crisis assessment, mental health, and substance use. So regardless of insurance, regardless of immigration status, regardless of, it doesn't matter. It is another resource for us that is, again, 24/7, 365, that folks can use in the midst of a crisis to get, you know, short-term support and connection or help to the things that they might be able to benefit from. So that together, the information on the cheat sheets is, again, just a way for our officers to have their eyes and ears open and to think about, you know, maybe this person should talk to Kristen, right? Or maybe this person should should go see a doctor, right? Do they have health insurance? They're complaining about something. Maybe you go see your primary care doctor, right? That's part of their health and their wellness too. And if you'll go to the last slide for me, please. Officer Sweeney had asked me about outcomes, and there are so many good things that come from our positions as district mental health clinicians. I couldn't even start to think of which story to tell you, one singular story, right? So I was thinking about maybe bigger themes. And the themes that stick out to me is that people don't know we exist. So when probationers come into our office and they figure out that we're there and they have an interaction with me, and maybe for the first time in a long time, they realize that they are being seen as a person and not as their legal history, not as a label, not as a felon, not as someone who is unworthy or incapable. And so sometimes just that experience of having a real conversation, developing rapport, having the unconditional positive regard and saying, regardless of what's happened, you're a real person who is here, who needs some help with X, Y, and Z. Let's make it happen, right? You deserve to feel better. We will feel better. They do better. And again, the idea is not to be on probation forever. So what can we do? And that kind of unexpected or surprise support is a good thing. People have typically responded very, very well to it. It's pretty refreshing. And it also gives me an opportunity to have conversations with folks about how probation works, about maybe their probation officer in professional ways, right? And to change their perspective about supervision or about law enforcement. To say that we are in the business of helping people to do better. That's part of what we're here for. And so can you give us an opportunity to do something different, right? Give us an opportunity, have those conversations with us. As I said before, lots of folks come to us and they have either maybe no mental health treatment history, or maybe they've had a negative experience somewhere along the line. And being able to be in the office to have conversations with folks and to maybe, again, put a more friendly face or more welcoming face on the field of mental health treatment, and to have them maybe have some kind of appreciation for just self-care, right? Taking care of themselves, realizing that they have value, and that as people, they need to be well. If they aren't well, none of this other stuff matters. And the big picture, again, is really, too many folks with mental health conditions end up in our jails and prisons. Our jails and prisons are our de facto mental health treatment facilities, and that's not where those folks should be. So we want to slow or ideally stop that revolving door of community, hospital, jail, community, hospital, jail. We want to get in the middle of that if we can. And this is not about changing someone's accountability, but this is about holding people responsible for their own wellness, right? Providing them education about why their treatment or their medication is so vital to their wellness, to their ability to comply with supervision, with their ability to remain in the community, and to keep those folks, again, in treatment settings or in the community where they're getting what they need, not in jails. That's not where these folks should be. And last but not least, I think is my last slide, was just my contact information. If you'd like my slides or any other information about me or about DMHCs or what we do, I'd welcome hearing from anybody. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who spoke on our panel today. Really appreciate all the great information and useful resources. I think, my colleague and I are both sitting in here thinking about some new things and new ways of doing things, and, to share with the rest of our staff and our offices. So I hope other people feel the same. Do we have any closing questions? I know we got some thank yous that people put in the chat. Somebody said, thanks to all, this is a great panel and I like the connection to Mental Health Month. This has been an amazing panel, great presentation. Somebody else said, you all provided a wealth of valuable information today. We appreciate you so much for taking the time to educate and collaborate for a better and more informed tomorrow. We do have a feedback form. If you could please fill it out, it's available right now in the chat. That would really help us so we have some good useful information moving forward. But if anybody has any questions for our panelists, please unmute yourselves and ask away. It's weird, it's a quiet bunch. Alrighty, well, if we don't have any questions, just let us know if you need anybody's contact information or if the panelists would like to put it in the chat. That would be super helpful, but please don't forget to fill out the feedback form, and we look forward to seeing you again in future presentations. Thanks so much and have a great day.